the amazing Karen and Kelly. Kelly crushed it this morning,
yeah,
huh?
She did.
And, it's really great to be able to support Leah and Reverend Leah and Reverend Jyoti. They are at this conference called the Sillamar, which is on the Central Coast, right near Monterey Bay in California. It's rough, right? It's rough. It's this really cool historic site that our founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and Religious Science, Dr. Ernest Holmes, he used to hold retreats there back when he was around. And, so it's really sacred ground for our entire denomination. And the first time Leah has gone. I think it's a really beautiful time for them. I'm so glad to be able to support them in being there, especially through this cool transition that this whole community is going through. I went to school with both Jyoti and Leah. Like, Jyoti graduated 1 year before me, and she sort of brought me up and invited me to replace her as the president on the student council, which is a pretty big deal, There's about 15 students. They were kind of rowdy. And Leah, came right after me, and we always used to pair up new students with students that have been in the program, and so she was my mentee. So I feel very close to both of them. I can't imagine a better process of this transition. I've seen churches do it really well, and I've seen churches do it really poorly, and everything they're doing just feels good. So I hope in the midst of this change, you're feeling how amazing it is. And to know that you're in good hands, right? And that this community will continue to grow and thrive. So grateful to be here. And so the topic today, whenever people Jyoti was reaching out, it's like, we need a talk title for your talk. And I'm like, I don't know yet what I'm going to talk about. And this is like a few weeks ago, right? Because they need to get all the information on the bulletin. So I was like, why don't we just talk about right now? And that will leave it open for whatever is going on that I want to talk about to be relevant. But it is. I think it's a challenge for me that I really like. It's an interesting thing to do this sort of Sunday morning talk routine, right? To how do we stay relevant? How do we stay really true to what's going on right now? How do we stay passionate about what we're talking about? So the spirit of this talk is just being as real and honest and as current as possible with sharing some things that are going in my life right now, some of the challenges that I'm facing in my little crazy mind that I have, and also some of the things that are going on in the world, right, that I'm having a reaction to, right? That I also want to talk about this relationship that we have as human beings, living in society and living together, and how do we navigate all the challenges that are before us. So I'm going to start out talking about myself a little bit. I'm going to Dr. Phil myself in public here a little bit. But yeah, I've been thinking about the future a lot because it's a really exciting thing. My wife and I have been married for 5 years now, and I think we're finally getting really ready to start our own family, which is the best thing in the world. There's nothing that brings me more joy than thinking about some little Hapa babies. Hapa means half Asian, half whatever. And we all know that Asian part makes babies really cute. I'm partial to Asian babies, but I'm obviously biased. There's nothing that brings me more. All babies are cute. Some look like a little uglier than others, but I would never say that.
I wondered what you were
some people,
say.
yeah, but they're all divine creatures of God, of course. But it's really exciting, there's this sort of mixed bag too, because I noticed it's bringing up some weird fears in me as well, right? Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of fun things to think about having a baby, right? And there's no other person that I would want to do it with. And even when we met, I was like, God, she's going to be the best mom. This is the most beautiful human in the world. She's so nurturing and caring, and I just can't wait for that. But it's also kind of terrifying, and you know that little baby's gonna grow up into a toddler and a teenager. And I have some friends that have toddlers and another friend that has teenagers right now, and it's kind of a lot. They are going through a ton just navigating those times. And I think they should just like make a place where toddlers and teenagers just like put them in a room together and just like let them work their feelings out. I think that would go a really, really long way. But you know, it's also bringing up just some fears, like the stuff around money, you know, and how we're gonna financially support this little human, right? I'm a minister. We don't make a ton of money. Like, there's probably some other professions that I could have spent 10 years of my education on and gotten a little bit more pay afterwards, you know. It's obviously a calling, and I wouldn't be doing anything else in the world, but that's a fear that's rising to the surface. And not just money itself, but like all my issues around money, which is really what the gift is in it, and also what's so terrifying about it, right? All of the fears that I have, all of the voices that I have in my head about there's not enough, and what are you going to do when this happens, and do you have this much saved, and is your house going to be big enough, and look at the Colorado housing market, it is crazy right now, you're never going to be able to buy a house, you're going to be renting for the rest of your life in this little 2-bedroom apartment, like how are you going to make, what if you have 2 kids, how are they going to fit, are they going to be sleeping in the same room, like this is my brain, right? And then, you know, not just that, but like, am I going to be a good dad? Like, will I be able to keep this thing alive, one? Like, I know that's like my primary job, but, you know, am I going to be a good dad? Like, I kind of get, like, whoever my kids are, like, they're going to be talking about stuff that I did in therapy, like, 20 years later. I've come to terms with that. But I still, you know, really want to do everything I can, and you know, I'm still just, I feel like I'm on this constant journey, just like navigating my own life, and then trying to figure out how to do that for another person. As I'm a little intimidated, right? I'm a little intimidated, and so these are some of the things that are coming up right now for me, and not to mention like what's going on in the world, right? Like a few Sundays ago, we all woke up to not 1 but 2 mass shootings. And 3 in a week. Yeah. I was a junior in high school when Columbine hit. I was at the school that was right next door to Columbine. And it's just crazy to me that 20 years later, you know, with friends that have been affected by that, like nothing's changed, right? And it bothers me that it's become politicized in this crazy way where like the conversation hasn't seemed to move forward after 20 years and so many mass shootings, right? And it weighs on my heart because, you know, I don't know a single person in my life that hasn't been affected by guns at some point in their life, right? And I got both sides. Like I got an uncle that taught me how to shoot, you know, and loves guns, and he's got that storage of guns. And I have, you know, folks in my life that are terrified. And a couple of them who like went through that Columbine shooting and are still dealing with the PTSD from it, right? And so it can feel like a lot, right? Like this being human thing is no joke, especially right now. Yeah. Right? Especially right now. So, you know, what I recognize is that despite all that, there are some things that I know I can lean into, always, to meet life, and to also recognize that there's something greater than my little crazy monkey mind brain. I watched Planet of the Apes last night, so it's like on my mind. Those guys are smart. But there's also a greater story always unfolding right here in the midst of our own. And it's always my job just to tap into that and to tune into that and to trust enough in order to be able to recognize that like we're all here for a reason. And that we all have some work to do, both here within ourselves and out there in the world. Like those two are inherently connected. And so I can take those same challenges that are happening in my life and in the world, and I can help transform them. And there's a few things I want to talk about that I've leaned into that have helped me done that. And it comes from this Gandhi quote. You all know who Gandhi is? Okay. And he's just had this simple quote that said, "Be truthful, gentle, and fearless." And this has been one of my mantras in life, just to help me navigate things that are going on. When I recognize in myself that, like, whenever I've had a challenge, leaning into these three statements, be truthful, gentle, and fearless, have served me tremendously, right? So we'll start with the first one, truthful. It can be hard to be truthful sometimes, especially with things that are going on with me. Like, when I'm up on stage, I'm kind of like a gregarious person. This is actually oftentimes much more easy to talk about myself from up here than it is just like sitting in the living room with my wife and being real about what's going on with me, right? A lot of the stuff I just shared, like, Rebecca hasn't heard yet. I mean, some of it, most of it, but some of it she hasn't, right? And I recognize, like, being truthful is so crucial, and that starts with being truthful with myself. And one of the practices that I've been doing again is journaling, which I recognize is just like this sort of adult spiritual form of having a diary, which is great, right? Because sometimes it takes me writing, it takes me just spending some time with myself without distractions to be able to, like, even recognize what the hell's going on with me, right? Because often it just feels like a weird knot in my stomach, or there's just something that's, like, not quite right, or like, why am I just anxious? Why do I have this, like, low-level anxiety? And often it just takes a little bit of time with myself, and writing is really helpful for me because it slows me down. Like, there's this lost art of writing. I recognize I stopped journaling when I got a smartphone.
Oh, yeah.
Because I used to carry around one of those little moleskins, you know, and I was write down directions to get to places. Do you guys remember that? Don't do that anymore. But I used to always have something on me where I could take part in the physical act of writing, whether that was just jotting down notes or thoughts or intentions or things that I'm just working on in my life. And so when I got a smartphone, they're like just went away because I'm like, I don't need this thing anymore. I got this smartphone, right? But I don't do it anymore. And so just slowing down and taking part in this, like, act of writing is so beautiful, and it allows me to be truthful with what's really going on. And that's important because I can't be truthful with my wife or with you all if I'm holding stuff in, if I'm not really connecting, if I'm not allowing myself time, like that beautiful poem by Mark Nepo that Kelly read, just to slow down enough to recognize that, like, right under the surface is this vast ocean of wisdom. And it's just like, it's like right here. It's closer than my breath. It's close. But if I just spend time just floating along the surface and pretending like everything's cool and just kind of getting rustled around by all the waves that will inevitably come, right? I will never be able to access that truth and that wisdom that's just, like, right here. And it takes just a little bit of slowing down to do that, right? So telling the truth is really important. And then when you look at the things that are going on in the world, wow, like, it's easy just to be like, oh, these things that aren't affecting me aren't really real. People are just making that stuff up, right? If whoever's taking part in this conversation around racism and racial equity this week, that's a big part of that, right? Because some of us have been directly affected by these systemic inequalities that have been happening literally since the beginning of time, but specifically within our country and our society. And some of us have maybe been privy to that, but maybe haven't been directly affected by that. But it's important that we spend enough time looking at the truth and listening to people's experiences and not discounting them just because they may feel uncomfortable or they may be far from our experience. But to have that heart and compassion and love that is wise enough and deep enough and open enough to be able to listen to those experiences and say, hey, I maybe have not experienced that, but I hear you, and I want to learn more. And I want to learn more so that I can become a part of the change, right? And that's being truthful. And that's being able to listen to and access those truths, especially the ones that we may not be exposed to all the time. That's really important. It's a big part of my work, right? I'm really devoted to creating cultures of inclusion and to addressing this thing called race within our country, right? And it's equally important, right, that we be gentle with ourselves in that process. Because it's easy to, like, also when you're involved in these conversations, to, like, go into a state of, like, guilt, right? Maybe about how we've participated in this. Or, like, when we're looking at the world, like, panic, like, everything's falling apart. What are we going to do? Or when we're looking at ourselves, be like, oh, wow, there is a lot in there. Is this too much? Like, can I handle this? It feels like that sometimes, right? It feels very uncomfortable. Although I kind of like discomfort and awkwardness. I kind of, I don't, maybe I'm creating that right now just by saying that, but like to me, it's like it's a really cool place to be because it just kind of like gets us out of our normal, just routine ways of being, right? Anytime I'm feeling awkward or uncomfortable, I'm like, oh, this is different. Something must be shifting here. That's kind of cool. I want to pay attention to that, right? But it's incredibly important we be gentle with each other too. It's easy, like these days, to look out and to be like just blame people for all the stuff that's going on. Like maybe we're political and we're like, it's fun to have a scapegoat, right? Whoever that scapegoat is, whatever that represents for you, whatever side of the aisle that you happen to be sitting on, it's really easy to blame the other side. It'd be like, if they weren't there, everything would be fine, right? And I'm telling you, like, there may be some aspects of truth to that, but the truest truth is that we've been doing this thing over and over again in our country, back and forth, since the beginning, right? And it does us no good to just blame the other side, you know? In fact, it like brings us kind of further apart from this thing called oneness that we like to talk about here in this community. You know, it's easy to be like, oh, we're all one. As long as you like think like me and look like me and act like me, as long as you don't ruffle my feathers, as long as you don't have different beliefs than I do, then you and I can be one. That sounds awesome. That feels really good. You know, it's much harder to recognize that spiritual truth of the ways in which that we are actually one as a community with people that you may disagree with people who create incredible anger within you, right? With people that challenge you, with people that you think are like lunatics in some way, right? But the truth is like, if you believe this here, if you sit here on a Sunday, and I'm so glad you are sitting here, there's a challenge that comes with walking the spiritual life too, and that's like, how do we really take these ideas and principles and really apply them out in ways especially that aren't easy, right? Like that's where our spiritual growth really comes. It's the ways that we're really forced to take a deeper step into the things that we believe in, right? And it's often those times where we get the biggest breakthroughs. When we're able to build a bridge with someone that we may not thought that we would ever build a bridge with, much less want to, right? Like, I don't want us like walking on the same path. Like, I don't want to share space. It's much more comfortable not to. I'm just going to talk smack about you behind your back. That's way better. And then be nice to you to your face, right? Like, that's great. Like, I love just being in that mode. It's very comfortable that way, right? But this is a challenge for us to be not just gentle with ourselves, but gentle with other folks too. So Ernest Holmes, he gave his last sermon at Asilomar, where Leah and Jyoti are right now. And it's called The Sermon by the Sea. And I'm going to share a couple different pieces with you. Because so this was like his last sermon. This is after like the denomination was like really on the rise, you know, and like it was growing like crazy, right? And people just thought that they had found the best thing in the world, which they had, right? But Ernest also recognized that there was something happening that he was concerned about, and that was this kind of arrogance and religious exceptionalism, right? So this is what he talked about. He said, He says, find me one person who has so completely divorced himself from all arrogance, and you will discover for me an open pathway to the kingdom of God here and now. Find me someone who is for something and against nothing, who is redeemed enough not to condemn others out of the burden of their own soul, and I will find another Savior, another Jesus, another exalted human being. Right? He's kind of calling everybody out. You know, right before this, he was talking about, listen, we've found something amazing. We have an approach to faith that allows us to not have a blind faith, but allows us to utilize demonstrations and really trying out spiritual principles for ourselves to come in direct like communion with the divine. We don't need someone else to do it for us. How amazing is that? I know we're all like really digging that right now, and we have to stop thinking that we're better than everyone else because of it. Right? So that's what I was thinking about. I think he was talking about here. What I'm talking about now is like, whoo, like we have to be extremely gentle with ourselves, and as much as we can, be gentle with other folks as well, because that is actually a pathway to God. Like that's another piece of this puzzle of how we access the divine over and over and over again within ourselves. And the last piece, right, is this fearlessness thing, right? And I like how Brene Brown talks about fearlessness. She talks about the word courage. Does everyone know Brene Brown? Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's this sociologist, scientist, social scientist who does lots of psychology research and has kind of blown up now. She has a Netflix special. If y'all have Netflix, so go home and watch that. It's like 45 minutes long. She had a viral video on TED, and she likes to talk about this thing called vulnerability. And vulnerability is able to happen when we're walking in this space of courage, right? And the way she talks about courage is courage. The Latin root of courage is cor, which just means heart, wholehearted. And so courage actually asks us to, like, open up our heart to access what's really going on in here, and open up our heart enough to be able to connect with someone that may be thinking something different than you, that maybe have a different political view, that may be like grinding your gears, maybe annoying you, maybe frustrating you, right? But to know that like we don't have to have the same opinions or beliefs, but we can all still be whole, perfect, divine beings. And that can stay intact no matter what. Like, we don't have to agree, but your wholeness, your divinity, your literal perfection as a person that is walking the earth as an emanation of the divine, like that will never be threatened in my presence, right? And that to me is kind of the challenge of our time, right? Like, all of our leaders are modeling a different way. Many of our political leaders are like, nope, just hate the other person, and if we win, we'll all be okay. But there's a deeper story, right, that I think is asking us to pay attention to the ways in which that story isn't working, right? That way of walking through the world is only creating more suffering. I know it does for me. I don't like being in confrontations and fights. It makes me sad, right? I love taking part in debate. I love sports. Like, I'm a competitive person. Like, if you want to throw down on some Scrabble, like, we are down. Like, I will crush you at Scrabble. But your wholeness and your divinity will stay intact. Right? But this is the beautiful challenge of our time, and it requires that we be fearless, right? We be fearless in a way where we don't need to diminish another person. We be fearless in a way where we can access our own discomfort and still make room for it. We can be fearless in a way where we can meet the challenges of the world, not be discouraged by them, but know that that's an opportunity for a deeper evolution that our world is just crying out for, right? There's there's another younger minister. We started this regeneration program, which is the scholarship program for younger ministers under 35, and we started at the same time. And he gave one of the keynote speeches at Asilomar, at this retreat. There's like 600 people in that room. It was beautiful to watch. Someone was streaming it on their cell phone, luckily, so I got to watch it on Facebook. And he said this beautiful thing. He said, this philosophy is not one of like a philosophy of positivity. Is it a philosophy of possibility? Right? Yes, this is not a philosophy of positivity. We're not just seeking to put on rose-colored glasses. It's one of possibility. It's recognizing that we have the agency to change our world for ourselves and for those around us as well. Right? So it requires that we trust. It requires that we recognize that we have power in this universe. And not only that, there's a power greater than us, and it can use us. Like, we can be a part of this unfoldment and this evolution that is seeking just to happen in this world and on this planet. And it can start right here. It can start with the conversations you're having on Wednesday. It can start with the classes that you're taking. It starts with believing in yourself enough to know that perhaps you have a role to play in that. And that perhaps that we were all born for such a time as this, that quote from the Bible. And that we're all ready, right? We're all here together, and we can lean into community like this in times where we forget. And we can lean into this deeper wisdom that lets us know, hey, like whatever we're going through, whether that's as an individual or as that collectively as a society, there's a greater and a deeper wisdom that is seeking to come to the surface and offer a new way of being, a new way of seeing, a new way of relating, a new way of walking together on this planet Earth. So, do I pray now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's your gig. You can do whatever you want.
Can I do whatever I want? So let's just take all this in for a sec. And just bring it to mind and into your heart, something that's whether that's in your personal life, or the life of someone you love, or maybe something that's going on in our greater society. It's like something that feels like a little bit of a challenge, whether that's in your workplace or your relationships or your health. Whatever that happens to be, just allow that to have a safe place within your heart and mind. And to know that, like, if there's any fear or resistance that is arising to the fore, that if we breathe enough into it, if we allow our heart to open wide enough, that right behind that fear, right underneath that discomfort, there is an ocean of wisdom and of peace and of ways in which this deeper wisdom within you that is showing up as the divine, as God, as the Atman, as that awakened state of Buddhahood, that's just waiting to come more deeply into your life and take root in you, as you, through you, knowing that it can become a gift from the beyond, right? That it can spur us to action, that it can call for greater healing, that it can allow us to step into a life in which we are able to say, like, I love you. Whether we're talking to ourselves or we're talking to another person, that we have the bravery to just simply live in that I love you space. And so what I know for each and every person sitting here today, and every person that may be watching the recording here online, is that there is a deeper love and a deeper presence that is seeking to make its way known through whatever is happening right now. Like right now, in your life. Whatever challenge is showing up, that right underneath that there is this invitation into a deeper walk with the divine, and a deeper authenticity of who you are, and a deeper understanding of who you've been called here to be. And so I give thanks in advance for all the ways in which we step into that, all the ways in which we have the bravery and the gentleness and the ability to speak the truth, so that our life can be a manifestation of the divine in everything that we do. And so it is with that, we just let it all go with great surrender, knowing there's a greater power in the universe that is for us, not against us. And we can let that be and take it all into every cell of our being and let it be so. And so it is.
Tomorrow, we're all looking forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow, the world's gonna be better then. Tomorrow, if we just hang on to tomorrow. Yeah, well, what about today? Listen to the kids outside and the way they're playing. What about today? See the world through their eyes and hear what they're saying. Today, don't let today slip away. What about today? Tomorrow, if things go right, our prayers will be answered tomorrow. Tomorrow, the sun is gonna shine. Tomorrow, if we just hang on to tomorrow. What about today? Look inside, really hear what you're saying. See the truth of who you are. Be gentle. It's all